Hello everyone and welcome back to The Lost Planeswalker. You're here with me, Jesse, The Lost Planeswalker, and today I'm doing another commander deck tech with one of the new alternate commanders from Lord of the Rings. The commander I chose to do in this video is Bilbo, Birthday Celebrant, and I named the deck Happy Birthday. Bilbo, Birthday Celebrant, is a white, black, and green, or Abzan, legendary creature halfling rogue. If you gain life, you gain that much life plus 1 instead. 2 white, black, and green. Tap, exile Bilbo, Birthday Celebrant. Search your library for any number of creature cards. Put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Activate only if you have 111 or more life. It looks like an extremely, really fun card to build around. If you don't know a lot about Lord of the Rings, the whole story for Lord of the Rings starts off at Bilbo's 111th birthday, which is super great. It's a really fun flavor text, having you have to gain so much life, but it's also a kind of a really cool challenge, right? And the way I decided to build this deck was not infinite life, because that kind of sucks. When you're playing against someone, you're like, well, they just kind of win because they have infinite life. But it's a lot harder and more fun, I guess, in my opinion, to build a deck where it's like, okay, well, I can gain like 10 life this turn, and maybe if I play my cards right next turn, I'll be able to gain, a little bit more, and, to try and get up to that 111 life. So this looks like a really fun deck. I had a really fun time building this one, so let's dive right in by looking at the mana rocks. First off, real simple. We got Arcane Signet, we got Commander Sphere, and we got Soul Ring. Basically staples. Commander Sphere and Arcane Signet, especially good. 3-color deck, so you really want to get those. Next, we have Golgari Signet, Orzhov Signet, and Selesnya Signet. I just put those in here to try to get some color fixing. Getting those signets is going to help us hit those colors we need. And lastly, for mana rocks, I have Pristine Talisman, just because it taps out of colorless and you gain a life. So with Bilbo out, you're going to gain 2 life every time you tap it, which seems really good. Quickly moving into ramp. The 2 ramp cards I threw in here were Cultivate and Rampant Growth. Put in whatever your favorite ramp cards are. I mean, these 2 are obviously some of the best. They keep reprinting them because people keep playing them because they're just fantastic. But if you want to throw something else in, go right ahead. Next, we're going to move into what I call Hobbits. In the Magic universe, we don't have Hobbits, we have halflings. And with the new cards coming out in this set, all of the new halflings or Hobbits, they are printing a ton of them, and they're all based around this food life gain sort of mechanic, which is super great because we love hobbits. We know hobbits love to eat, so food makes perfect sense. Some of these cards are actually really great and make food a very viable deck. I believe that's what the Abzan commander deck is gonna be. Obviously Bilbo is one of the co-commanders, but you have Frodo and Sam as the face commanders, and food is just really good. So I wanted to throw in a lot of that because we can use it to gain life and a lot of other stuff. So let's start out by looking at Archivist of Ogma, Delighted Halfling, and East Farthing Farmer. Archivist, great. You can gain life and draw cards. Delighted Halfling is a super sick card because there's a lot of legendary creatures in this deck, and just for legendary creatures in general, this is going to help you cast them and make sure they can't get countered. This is honestly one of the most powerful cards probably in this set because it's in green, meaning that green that suffers from not being able to do anything about counters or spending your entire turn to cast one big thing, well, now you can protect it. So that's actually really awesome. So when East Farthing Farmer enters the battlefield, you create food, and when you do, a creature will get +1/+1 for each food you control, which is really cool. After you have a bunch of food onto the battlefield, you can play him to pump a creature really big, so that seems great. Next is Eleanor Gardener, Enris Gloomstalker, and Frodo Adventurous Hobbit. Eleanor is actually a really sick card because when it enters, you create a food, but if you sacked a food this turn, you can go search for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tap, and then shuffle. This is actually really cool. I mean, you're ramping every turn if you're cracking a food with her, so that's sick. Uranus Gloomstalker, Death Touch. When she attacks, you can turn a land from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is really great. I mean, that Death Touch is going to help keep your opponents from swinging into you, but also, if you're playing fetch lands or anything like that, you can get them back, or maybe just sack a land and get it back. So yeah, really cool. And Frodo Adventurous Hobbit, this is the one of the 2 co-commanders. So you partner with Sam Loyal Attendant. It is Vigilance. Whenever Frodo Adventurous Hobbit attacks, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, the ring tempts you. Then if Frodo is your ring bearer, the ring tempts you 2 more times this game. Draw a card. This is just going to be a basically card draw outlet, which is super great. Black is pretty good at drawing cards. White is getting there. So this is just awesome. You're going to be able to draw cards basically whenever you gain 3 or more life. life. So you're going to hopefully do that every turn, and it's going to work out good. Next, we have Lortho Corrupt Sheriff, Meriadoc Brandybuck, and Peregrine Took. Lortho Corrupt Sheriff is a legendary creature halfling rogue that has, when a player casts their second spell each turn, you lose life and create a treasure token. This is a really, really cool card. You're going to lose a little bit of life, but those treasures you're going to get is awesome. This is going to be seen as a threat by your table, so you're going to have to either protect it, or maybe they don't care and you just get a bunch of treasure and can kind of pop off. It's a really great card. Meriadoc has, whenever one or more halflings you control attack, create a food. So you can create some food subtly, which is pretty great. And Peregrine Took has, if one or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus an additional food are created instead. And you can sack 3 foods to draw a card. So if you're playing this in a deck where you're making a lot of tokens, you can make those food and then draw cards. Or if you're just playing in a deck like this that makes food, well, you get to draw cards. So I think that's actually really, really cool. Next up, we have Rosie Cotton of South Lane, Sam Loyal Attendant, and Samwise Gamgee. Rosie Cotton of South Lane has, when she enters the battlefield, you create a food, and whenever you create a token, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control other than Rosie. This is pretty neat. We're getting a lot, just like Peregrine Took. This applies to outside food decks, outside halflings altogether, so this is actually really, really cool. Sam Loyal Attendant is the other co-commander with Frodo, Adventurous Hobbit, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you create a food, which is pretty great. And then activated abilities of food you control cost 1 less to activate. This is kind of a really big deal and really makes, when you're playing this deck, kind of hard, in my opinion, to figure out what you want to play as your commander, because obviously Bilbo is just fantastic. I mean, you can build a deck around him, but Frodo and Sam kind of have their own thing going, and I'm interested to see what kind of cards they put in the deck when it does come out, but I think running either of these is actually really strong and really powerful. With Sam out there, you're able to activate Frodo's ability every turn, so it's really great. And then finally, Samwise Gamgee. When another non-token creature enters battlefield under control, create a food. Okay, pretty great. Sack 3 foods to return target historic card from your graveyard to your hand. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. This is actually really, really interesting because I can see you playing this and kind of getting those value pieces from artifacts, legendaries, and sagas, getting those back again and being able to do it over and over again, especially like sagas. Some of those sagas are really strong, so being able to make a lot of food seems really good, and that seems really cool. And lastly, we have Samwise the Stout-Hearted, Shire Sheriff, and Sanitarium Bandit. Samwise the Stout-Hearted is a really neat creature because you can play him at flash speed and get back something that was put into the graveyard this turn from the battlefield. So that's pretty cool because maybe your creature died, maybe somebody killed it, died during combat, all sorts of stuff. It doesn't have to be a creature, it could be any permanent, but get it back and be able to replay it. Shire Sheriff makes it so you can sack a token when it enters and basically just exile something until he leaves. We've seen a lot of cards like this. Some of them are better than this, some of them aren't, but this is a cool card too. Helps with some removal in this deck, so I really like it. And then Sanitarium Bandit has, whenever Sanitarium Bandit attacks, you can pay a life and make a treasure. So I mean, that seems pretty great. You don't really have a lot of evasion in this deck, that goes more in a rogue deck, but if you can hit one or just play it for fun, I think that's great. Now moving into kind of the core of this deck, we're going to look at more of the life gain cards. That includes creatures, instants, enchantments, all this sort of stuff that's going to help you gain life. And starting off, we have Ajani's Welcome, Angel of Destiny, and Authority of the Council. Ajani's Welcome lets you gain life whenever a creature enters battlefield under your control. You could do this in a lot of ways to really make it busted. This is where you get into those infinite combos with, certain other cards, but I think we're going to gain enough life subtly from just the creatures we're playing that this is going to be good. So our next card is Angel of Destiny, and it's really a finisher in this deck because it does 2 really important things. First off, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each gain that much life, which is fantastic. You can gain a lot of life this way, especially if you're swinging in with a lot of creatures. Secondly, if you have 15 or more life and then your starting life total and you attacked a player with Angel of Destiny this turn, they lose the game, which is just incredibly powerful. You're guaranteed, if you are able to play out all your life gain and just play out your deck, you're going to gain a ton of life. So just being able to kill an opponent or just get them out of the game like that is incredibly, incredibly strong. And Authority of the Council, one of my favorite cards. Creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped, which is great for you. And then when they enter, you gain a life. So that's really, really powerful. Now, this card doesn't work as good because you don't gain life off of your creatures entering, but you're still going to gain a ton of life passively from your opponents. Moving on, we have Blunt the Assault, Cleric class, and Congregate. Blunt the Assault gains you life for each creature on the battlefield, and then prevents all damage that would be dealt this turn. This is really cool kind of fog card that also gains you a lot of life, so pretty sweet. Cleric class has, whenever you would gain life, you gain that much life +1 instead. For its level 2 ability, whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control. And its level 3 is, whenever this class becomes level 3, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. You gain life equal to its toughness. Now, we don't have a ton of creatures with a lot of toughness, but that's pretty strong. And lastly, we have Congregate, which says target player gains 2 life for each creature on the battlefield. We're going to be able to gain a ton of life with this card, just being able to play it out. Even if we just gain 10 life or so, it's each creature on the battlefield, so I believe that may trigger Bilbo separately each time, which is just going to make us gain even more life. Our next 3 creatures are Daxos, Blessed by the Sun, Elas Ilkor, Sadistic Pilgrim, and Essence Warden. Daxos gets bigger butt for the amount of white pips you have on creature cards on the battlefield, which is great, and whenever another creature you control enters or dies, you gain 1 life. Elas Ilkor, Sadistic Pilgrim is a really cool Orzhov card that I've wanted to build a commander deck around. He has Death Touch, and whenever another creature enters a battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life, and whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life. So this is going to work for us when it enters and exits just like Daxos, but damage our opponents when they kill our creatures. And lastly, Essence Warden has, whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain a life. This is really similar to the Soul Sisters, which we're going to talk about here in just a second, but it's in green and we can play it in this deck, so we are going to for sure. Next, we have Life Gift, Prosperous Innkeeper, and Revenge of Ravens. Life Gift is an enchantment, and whenever a land comes into play, you gain 1 life. And with Bilbo out there, in a 1 turn cycle, if everybody plays their 1 land drop for the turn, you're going to gain 8 life, which seems really strong. So the quicker you can get it out, the more life you're going to gain from it. Prosperous Innkeeper is a super great card, because when it enters, you create a treasure, and then whenever another creature enters under your control, you're going to gain a life. And Revenge of the Ravens is a really neat card that I was kind of excited when I realized what it does, but when a creature attacks you or planeswalker you control, their controller loses life and you gain a life. Now this is going to trigger for each creature, so you're going to gain 2 life, making your opponents really have to work to swing into you. They're either going to have really big creatures or, just kind of swing into you, and maybe they forget you're going to gain a ton of life and you actually come out positive on that end. That would be that'd be really funny. Next we have Riot Control, Soul Warden, and Soul's Attendant. Riot Control is a really neat card that, if later in the game and somebody could potentially kill you, I like to keep up, but you gain 1 life for each creature your opponents control, and then you prevent all damage that would be dealt to you this turn. That's really sick. Play it during combat, gain a bunch of life, and then prevent all that damage. That would be pretty great. Soul's Warden and Soul's Attendant are pretty similar. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain a life. So, it just doesn't get any better than that. If your opponents are playing a token deck or just playing out their deck, having both of these out there, you can gain so much life so easily, and with Bilbo, it's just going to be doubled, and that 111 life is looking better and better. And lastly, we have Sunscorch Regent, Sutra Priest, and Whip of Erebos. Sunscorch Regent has flying, and whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Sunscorch Regent, and you gain a life. This is just going to incentivize our opponents to, not cast spells, because we're just going to gain a ton of life from it, and put a +1/+1 counter on our creature, make it bigger. This means if we have an opponent either play a spell or cast a creature, we're just going to be getting life. So it doesn't matter what they do, we're winning. Sutra Priest is one of my favorite cards of all time, because whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you can gain a life, and whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may have that player lose a life. This is one of my favorite cards because when you're playing against decks that are very creature heavy, or in general they make a lot of tokens, maybe it's a infinite token deck, well, they can't go infinite with this because they'll die. So that's really great. And finally, Whip of Erebos. A little extra life gain gives all our creatures lifelink. Not that this is, the way we're supposed to win in this deck, because that's not really how it works, but we can gain some subtle life through that, or maybe we swing out to hit that, last life we need to get to 111. It's just a really great card, and, works on attacking or blocking, so if we make some tokens in this deck, we can just let them die and gain some subtle life from it. Now that we've talked about life gain, let's look at a couple of life doublers I put in this deck. So starting off, we have Beacon of Immortality, Immortality, Boon Reflection, Celestial Mantle, and Rock's Faithmender. These are all cards that are really going to boost our life gain more than we already are. So Beacon of Immortality doubles a target player's life total, and then we shuffle it into our deck, meaning for 6 mana, if we have, let's say 50 life, now we have 100. So that's fantastic. You know, it can really put us over the top. It's going to be hard to cast that and then activate Bilbo, but if we're in a tough spot and we need to gain some life, this can just double our life total really nicely. Boon Reflection has, if you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. Pretty great. I love it. So yeah. Celestial Mantle is 3 white. Enchantment Aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +3/+3, and then whenever enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player, double its controller's life total. This is a sick card. We do have a couple cards with evasion that we really want to put this on, and, you know, giving it that +3/+3 is probably going to help. You know, you're going to play this later in the game, so you're going to need some way to sneak it in. Maybe you can make a deal with somebody, but this card, when it hits, is worth the cost. And lastly, we have Rock's Faithmender, which has lifelink, and if you gain life, you gain twice that, and has lifelink, and if you gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. Very similar to Boon Reflection, but having multiple of these in the deck is really, really helpful, and if we can play both of them, that's really, really, really great. Moving on, we have some removal in the deck. There's a couple parts of removal that are pretty standard, but there's this one I'm very excited about. So starting off, we have Mortality Spear, Path to Exile, and Swords Plowshares. Destroy non-land permanent, exile target creature, You guys know the deal. These are some of the best removal spells, especially the Path and Swords. But the next card that is brand new, that came out, I think this morning or yesterday, it was very cool, is the Battle of Bywater. 1 white sorcery. Destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. Then create a food token for each creature you control. So one of the really cool parts about this card that I had to double check, because I'm like, oh man, are we going to kill all the hobbits? All of the hobbits, halflings, created in this set are below 2 power, which I think is supposed to be, you know, halflings aren't really that strong, even, you know, the strong ones. But this is a really, really cool card, because if you're playing small, low creature to ground decks, this is incredible. You know, if you're playing small token decks, human decks, or whatever, where you just go wide, this is going to be one of those cards that you see in a lot of those decks. So this is actually a really, really cool card. And we get the added bonus of making food tokens for each creature we control, which is exactly what we want to do. So that's great. Moving on, we have some reanimation or card returns back to our hand with Balaged Recovery, Cosmic Rebirth, Malakir Rebirth, and Revive the Shire. Balaged Recovery is a land that on the other side has return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Cosmic Rebirth is a new card from Aftermath that has choose target permanent. You can choose target permanent card in your graveyard. If its mana value is 3, if it has mana value 3 or less, you may put it on the battlefield. If you don't put it on the battlefield, put it in your hand and you gain 3 life. This is gonna let us return something, but also let us gain some life, which is pretty great. Malakir Rebirth is gonna help save one of our creatures. We choose a target creature and pay 2 life, and then if that creature would die this turn, it returns back tapped under our control. So that's really great. And here's a new one called Revive the Shire that returns a target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand and create a food. So I really like that. Obviously the food's great, so I threw it in. Now before we get to the lands, I want to look over some of the value pieces in this deck. They kind of just didn't fit in anywhere else, and you know, maybe they help when you gain life or whatever, or maybe they help you just draw more cards. So I wanted to throw those out right here. Starting off, we have Angelic Accord, Beast Whisperer, and Celestine the Living Saint. Angelic Accord is awesome in this deck. It's really, really strong with the food token synergy. This is going to be one of those cards that your opponents are really going to fear, because at the beginning of each end step, not just yours, if you gain 4 more life, you create a 4/4 white angel with flying. This is pretty sick, because with Bilbo out, those food tokens you crack are going to gain you 4 life. So this should be able to happen every turn if you can make enough food, which is incredible. Beast Whisperer, whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Pretty simple, pretty great. Celestine the Living Saint is a really cool card from the Warhammer Commander decks and has Healing Tear. At the beginning of your end step, return target creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn. This is a really great card, because if we want to use our small hobbits for blocking, we can let them die, and then once we gain life from a food token or lifelink or whatever, we can get it back that same turn or get it back whenever. This is honestly a really great card. A lot of those hobbits that make tokens or make our creatures bigger when they re-enter the battlefield is really going to be a benefit to have when we have this card on the battlefield. Dina, Soul Steeper, Heliod, Suncrowned, and Karlov, the Ghost Council is our next 3 value pieces, with Dina having whenever you gain a life, each opponent loses a life, which is going to be incredibly strong with all of those creatures that trigger whenever a creature enters to gain us life. Those are all separate triggers, so if an opponent plays a creature, they could drain the entire board for 4 or 5, who knows. So this is awesome. And you can sack another creature to basically give Dina bigger power, which isn't super great in this deck, but that first ability is killer. Heliod, the Suncrowned, is indestructible and is a creature as long as their devotion is 5 or more. And whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control, which is super good. All those triggers, whenever creatures or whatever enter, are going to make a really, really big creature. And because it's indestructible, it's going to be really hard to remove. And for 1 and a white, we can give another creature lifelink, which is going to be great when we build up a giant creature and can swing out and just gain a ton of life. Next is Karlov of the Ghost Council. Whenever you gain life, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Karlov, which if you have 2 things out whenever a creature enters you gain life, he's going to get 4 bigger every turn. And then just for a white and a black, you can remove 6 of those counters to exile a target creature. There's an incredible amount of removal you can gain from this card. It's probably going to be a pretty big threat. Being able to protect it is going to be important, and just being able to exile stuff whenever you want, maybe it's a threat or maybe you just don't like your opponent's commander on the battlefield, you're going to be able to do that so easily. Next we have March of the Multitudes, Sunbound, and Terralisar Moondancer. March of the Multitudes is a really cool Convoke spell that has create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens with lifelink, which when Bilbo's out, if there's still 1/1s, you're going to be able to gain 2 life whenever they attack or block. So this is an incredible card. Sunbound is probably a finisher in this deck if you can play it on the right creature, but you enchant a creature, and enchanted creature has whenever you gain life, put that many +1/+1 counters on this creature, which is going to be a lot, and it's going to be very, very big. And Terralisar Moondancer has whenever you gain life, you put a +1/+1 counter on her and scry 1. This is going to make it so if you're digging for a certain card, land, whatever, you're going to gain that life and just be able to dig and find whatever you need. And lastly, in our value pieces, we have Vito, Thorn of the Dusk Rose. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. And for 3 black, creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. While I don't see us activating that second ability too often, being able to gain life and make an opponent lose life is really, really powerful. Like I said again, if you're getting a ton of life, you're going to be able to drain an opponent for a ton of life. Maybe it's the person at the table who's a threat, or maybe they only have a couple life left and you're just able to knock them out with it. Finally, I want to move into the lands. Usually I don't build up the lands too extensively, but there was a couple types of lands I really wanted to call out here, because with Bilbo, playing those lands that enter tapped but gain you a life are actually much more valuable than they are normally. Starting off from March of the Machine, we just had this cycle reprinted. We have Blossoming Sands, Jungle Hollow, and Scoured Barrens. These all enter the battlefield tapped, and when they enter the battlefield, you gain a life. This also helps color fix, so they're really great. Another set of cards we have is from New Capenna with Broker's Hideout, Cabaret Courtyard, Obscura Storefront, and Riveteer's Outlook. Unfortunately, there's no Abzan one that can find one of each, but all of these can at least find 2 of what you need, and we have plenty of basic lands in the deck for this to really be powerful. Moving on, we have some cards that just gain you some life when they enter, like Calabria Crossroads and Radiant Fountain, and there are some other utility cards other than just the normal forests, plains, and swamps that we have in this deck, like Blighted Steppe, that we can sacrifice it to gain 2 life for each creature we control. Command Tower, Mirren of the Moaning Well, which we can sack a creature to gain life equal to its toughness. Sapseep Forest, which we can gain 1 life if we have 2 or more green permanents. And Vault of the Archangel, which creatures you control gain Death Touch and lifelink until end of turn, which can either be a card we can use offensively or defensively, so I'm really excited. So I think that's a really great card to add in this deck. And yeah, that's it. You know, we have a really small mana curve with this deck at 2.71, which is super great. That's what I love to see. You know, obviously we have a lot of hobbits in this deck, and yeah, this is one of my favorite decks I've built recently. You know, there's only a couple tokens, but it just seems incredibly fun to gain that much life, even if you're not activating Bilbo to get, you know, Craterhoof Behemoth or other game enders. You know, just having fun and gaining life is a a really fun part of Commander. And if you're getting tired of Commander, possibly because you're just tired of things not working out, Life Gain is a great strategy because it's not really threatening most opponents. Even if they're going to attack you, you're pretty much going to be able to gain enough life where you can just stay in the game and do what you love. So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you're as excited for this next set as I am. There's some really fun cards I'm really excited to get my hands on, you know, not only for Commander but for Modern. I play a little bit of Modern, but you know, this is straight into Modern, so I'm really excited to see how that shifts up the power rankings. And you know, if you love Hobbits and Lord of the Rings and all this stuff, I'm very happy if you stayed along and watched this video to the end. So thank you so much. You know, if you did enjoy, please consider leaving me a like and comment down below. Is there a card you think I should have added, either new or old? And you know, and I just want to say thank you again. If you really enjoyed this and really helped me out, I'd really love a subscribe from you. I try to put out Commander decks at least once a week, and I try to do other content. I'll probably be doing a set review talking about some of my favorite cards, talking about cards that are just good in general, but then cards that I think are just neat. But yeah, so thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you later, Planeswalkers.